"Dad, you're not getting a single penny from Mom's will. You might as well not even bother showing up tomorrow." Those were the exact words my son Austin threw at me over the phone last Tuesday night. I'm Mike Thompson, 52 years old, and I've been dealing with this kind of disrespect from my own kid for the past 2 years. Ever since his mother Rachel decided to destroy our 18-year marriage by moving her boyfriend Brandon into the house I built with my own 2 hands. Let me back up a bit. 2 years ago, I thought I had it all figured out. I owned Thompson Construction, a company I started from nothing back when I was 27. Started as a guy with a pickup truck and a toolbox, bid on small residential jobs around Dallas. Worked 14-hour days for the first 5 years, sleeping in my truck between job sites sometimes. Slowly built up to bigger projects, office buildings, retail centers, even a few small hospitals. By the time I hit 50, we were pulling in $6.8 million in annual revenue. I had 4 full crews, 47 employees, and a reputation for finishing commercial projects on time and under budget. The construction business in Texas is cutthroat. You're competing against companies that'll lowball just to get work, dealing with material cost spikes, labor shortages, and clients who want champagne results on a beer budget. But I'd survived 3 recessions and built something solid. Rachel and I lived in a beautiful 4,800 square foot home in Plano that I'd designed and built myself. Every board, every fixture, every detail came from my hands. Custom oak cabinets I'd crafted in my workshop, stone fireplace I'd laid myself, even the deck where we used to have barbecues every summer, 3-car garage with a workspace where I still tinkered with classic car restoration on weekends. We got married when I was 34 and she was 28. Austin came along 2 years later when I was 36. I was working 60-hour weeks back then, trying to establish the business, but I made sure to coach his little league teams and never missed a school play. Rachel worked in marketing for a mid-size firm until Austin turned 10, then decided she wanted to focus on family and maybe start that interior design blog she always talked about. That blog lasted exactly 3 posts. I should have seen the signs earlier. Rachel started getting restless around her 46th birthday. Suddenly, she was joining yoga classes, hiking groups, book clubs, always something that took her away from home 3 or 4 nights a week. She'd come back energized in a way I hadn't seen in years, talking about all these new friends she was making. The hiking group leader was Brandon Walsh, 45 years old, sales manager at some tech startup, recently divorced, the kind of smooth-talking guy who wore designer hiking boots that had never seen real dirt. Rachel started mentioning his name more and more during dinner conversations. Brandon showed us this amazing trail near Lake Texoma today. Brandon knows so much about outdoor photography. Brandon thinks I should try rock climbing. I was in the middle of bidding on the biggest project of my career, a $4.2 million mixed-use development in downtown Dallas. The margins were tight, competition was fierce, and I was putting in 70-hour weeks crunching numbers and managing subcontractor quotes. So I wasn't paying close enough attention to what was happening at home. Big mistake. The day I found out will stick with me forever. I'd come home early because our structural engineer had food poisoning and we had to postpone a crucial client meeting. I pulled into my driveway at 2:15 p.m. on a Thursday and saw a silver BMW parked where I usually put my F-150. Not a car I recognized. Definitely not one that belonged in my driveway. I walked through the front door I'd hung myself and heard voices coming from upstairs. Rachel's voice and a man's voice I'd never heard in my house before. My heart started pounding. I stood there in my own entryway for maybe 30 seconds, trying to convince myself there was some innocent explanation. There wasn't. I climbed the stairs I'd built with reclaimed oak from a demolished church in East Texas. Every step creaked in a pattern I knew by heart. When I reached the top, the bedroom door was halfway open. I could see clothes scattered on the hardwood floor I'd installed myself. What I saw in my own bedroom, in the bed I'd shared with Rachel for 18 years, made my blood turn to ice. Brandon scrambling to get his clothes on while Rachel just stared at me like I was the one who'd done something wrong. No embarrassment, no shame, just this defiant look like she'd been caught doing something she had every right to do. "Mike, we need to talk," she said, pulling a sheet around herself. "Yeah, I think we do," I replied, my voice surprisingly steady. That conversation didn't go the way I expected. Instead of apologizing or trying to explain herself, Rachel went straight on the offensive. She told me she'd been unhappy for years. Said I cared more about my construction projects than my own family. Said Brandon made her feel appreciated in ways I never could. "I want you out of this house," she said. "Brandon's moving in." I actually laughed. "Rachel, this is my house. I designed it. I built it with my own hands. My name's on the deed." "Our names are on the deed, Mike. Community property, remember? And I'm not leaving." She was right about the deed. When we bought the land and I designed the house, my lawyer had advised putting both our names on everything. "Protects both spouses," he'd said. Seemed like smart planning at the time. Now it felt like the biggest mistake of my life. The next few weeks turned into a war zone. Rachel hired Patricia Matthews, a divorce attorney who specialized in high-asset dissolution and had a reputation for destroying husbands. Suddenly, I was painted as the villain in this whole situation. According to her legal team, I was a workaholic who'd emotionally abandoned my wife, forcing her to seek companionship elsewhere. Meanwhile, Brandon Walsh was living in my house, sleeping in my bed, using my workshop tools, even driving my restored 1967 Mustang that I'd spent 3 years rebuilding. Austin thought the whole arrangement was fantastic. Austin was 26 at the time, still living at home because Rachel kept making excuses for why he couldn't quite get his life together. He had a decent job as a marketing coordinator at a tech firm, pulling in about $55K a year, but somehow was always short on money for his own apartment. Rachel would slip him cash constantly, undermining every conversation I tried to have with him about financial responsibility. "Brandon's way cooler than you, Dad," Austin told me one evening when I came home to find them playing video games in my living room. "He actually listens to my cryptocurrency ideas instead of just lecturing me about hard work." That stung more than I expected. I'd spent years trying to teach Austin the value of building something with your own hands, showing him how to read blueprints, explaining why quality craftsmanship mattered. But apparently Brandon's get-rich-quick schemes were more appealing than learning an honest trade. The divorce proceedings were brutal. My lawyer, Jim Rodriguez, had handled construction contract disputes for me before, but family law was different territory. Rachel's attorney painted me as a controlling husband who'd forced his wife into domestic servitude while I pursued my obsession with work. They conveniently ignored the fact that my obsession had paid for Rachel's yoga retreats, her designer clothes, the luxury SUV she drove, and the comfortable lifestyle she'd enjoyed for nearly 2 decades. They also ignored that Rachel had quit her marketing job by choice, saying she wanted to explore her creative side and maybe start that interior design business that never materialized. "Texas is a community property state," Jim explained during one of our strategy sessions. "But you built the business during the marriage. We can argue for a larger share based on your contributions and the fact that you're the primary income generator." It didn't work out that way. Rachel's team brought in a forensic accountant who valued Thompson Construction at $2.1 million, despite the fact that I'd been offered $3.5 million for it just 6 months earlier by a larger firm looking to expand. They argued that my 70-hour work weeks constituted marital neglect and that Rachel deserved compensation for sacrificing her career aspirations. The whole process took 16 months, 16 months of watching another man live in the house I'd built, drive my cars, use my tools, and turn my son against me. During that time, I had to keep my business running while dealing with legal depositions, financial audits, and the constant stress of watching my life get dissected by strangers. The construction industry doesn't pause for personal problems. I was competing against Morrison Brothers Construction for the downtown project, and they were undercutting my bids by using subcontractors who paid workers cash under the table. I lost 3 major contracts during the divorce because I couldn't focus properly on the detailed estimates and client presentations that commercial work requires. When the final settlement came through, Rachel got the house, half of our investment portfolio, half the value of my business assets, and $4,200 a month in spousal support for the next 5 years. I got to keep my company and moved into a 200-square-foot condo across town that felt like a prison cell compared to the home I'd designed. The financial hit was devastating. Between legal fees, the settlement, and business revenue I'd lost during the divorce, I was out about $1.2 million. But the emotional cost was worse. Austin barely spoke to me during the whole process, and when he did, it was usually to complain about something. "Mom says you're being unreasonable about the house settlement. Brandon thinks you should just sell the business and split the money. Why can't you just be happy for Mom? She's finally found someone who appreciates her." The worst part was watching Brandon Walsh waltz into my life and act like he'd earned everything I'd worked 25 years to build. He'd sit at my kitchen table during Austin's visits, offering business advice like he knew something about construction. This was a guy who sold software subscriptions for a living, giving me lectures about how I should modernize my operations and embrace digital transformation. One Saturday, I came by to pick up some tools from my workshop and found Brandon using my table saw without safety glasses, cutting boards for some Pinterest project Rachel wanted. 25 years of accumulated tools, jigs, and equipment I'd carefully organized, and this amateur was treating my workspace like his personal Home Depot. "Hey, Mike," he said casually, not even stopping the saw. "Hope you don't mind." Rachel wanted some floating shelves for the guest room. I minded plenty, but legally I couldn't say anything. It was Rachel's house now, and Brandon was her guest. I gathered my cordless drill set and a few hand tools and left without saying a word. That night, I sat in my empty condo and seriously considered selling the business and moving to Colorado. Start over somewhere nobody knew my story. For the next 8 months, I focused on rebuilding. The divorce had cost me significant capital, but Thompson Construction had solid fundamentals. I landed a contract to build a medical office complex in Frisco, then picked up renovation work on 2 retail centers in Richardson. Started working with a new architect who appreciated quality craftsmanship over cutting corners. I hired 3 new crew members, including Roberto Martinez, a master electrician who'd been looking for steady work with a company that treated employees fairly. Roberto became my informal second in command, handling the technical challenges while I focused on client relationships and business development. Slowly, I started dating again. Nothing serious, just coffee with Linda from my church and dinner with Sarah, a widow who owned a flower shop downtown. It felt strange trying to trust someone new after Rachel's betrayal, but I was beginning to think I might have a future beyond being the bitter divorced guy. Austin and I had dinner once a month, usually at chain restaurants where the conversation stayed surface level. He'd update me on his job, his cryptocurrency investments, and his social life. I'd tell him about construction projects and ask about his plans for moving out of Rachel's house. He always had excuses. Then, on a Friday afternoon in October, everything changed. I was reviewing material estimates for the medical complex when my phone rang. Austin's name on the caller ID, which was unusual for a weekday afternoon. "Dad, there's been an accident." His voice was shaky, different from the usual detached tone I'd gotten used to over the past 2 years. "What kind of accident? Are you okay?" "It's Mom and Brandon. They were driving back from San Antonio. There was a drunk driver. Rachel and Brandon had been driving back from a weekend getaway in San Antonio when a drunk driver ran a red light at 11:47 p.m. and hit them head-on. Brandon was behind the wheel of his BMW when the impact happened. He died instantly. Rachel was rushed to Methodist Hospital in critical condition, but after 6 hours of surgery, the doctors couldn't do anything more. I'm not going to pretend I felt devastated when Austin called with the news. After everything that had happened, I mostly felt numb. This was the woman I'd loved for 18 years, who'd given me my son, who'd also systematically destroyed my life and turned my kid against me. When someone dies who you used to love but had grown to resent, the emotions get complicated fast. "I need to get to the hospital," Austin said, his voice breaking. "Can you meet me there?" I drove my F-150 through Dallas traffic at midnight, thinking about the last conversation Rachel and I had. It was 3 months earlier when I'd stopped by to pick up my grandfather's toolbox that she'd been storing in the garage. She'd answered the door in yoga clothes, looking annoyed that I'd interrupted her evening. "Make it quick, Mike. Brandon and I have dinner reservations." That was it. No small talk, no asking how I was doing, just get your stuff and leave. Now she was gone, and I wasn't sure what I was supposed to feel. The hospital waiting room was sterile and cold. Austin sat hunched over in a plastic chair, still wearing his work clothes from the tech company. He looked younger than his 26 years, lost and confused. When he saw me, he actually stood up and hugged me for the first time in 2 years. "I don't know what to do, Dad." "We'll figure it out," I told him, and meant it. The next few days were a blur of funeral arrangements, paperwork, and difficult conversations. Austin was Rachel's next of kin, so most of the decisions fell to him. He chose a service at the Methodist church where we'd been married even though Rachel hadn't attended regularly in years. The funeral was awkward as hell. I sat in the back row, feeling like an outsider at my own ex-wife's memorial service. Austin cried through the entire ceremony while Rachel's yoga friends and hiking buddies filled the front pews. Some of them kept shooting me dirty looks, like somehow this was my fault for not being a better husband. Brandon's family held a separate service for him. I didn't attend, and Austin didn't either. Apparently, Brandon's ex-wife had made it clear that Rachel wasn't welcome at his funeral, and by extension, neither was anyone associated with her. After the service, Austin and I went to lunch at a Cracker Barrel near the cemetery. He picked at his chicken fried steak while I worked on coffee and tried to figure out how to navigate this new reality. "Mom left a will," Austin said finally. "Her lawyer called this morning. Patricia Hoffman wants to meet with both of us next Tuesday at 2 p.m. "Both of us?" "Yeah, apparently you're mentioned in it." Austin's voice carried a bitter edge, though I can't imagine why. "Mom made it pretty clear what she thought of you during the divorce." That's when he delivered the line that started this whole story. "Dad, you're not getting a single penny from Mom's will. You might as well not even bother showing up tomorrow." According to Austin, Rachel had been very explicit about her intentions during the months before her death. Everything was supposed to go to him: the house, her half of our old investment accounts, her life insurance policy, everything. She'd apparently spent considerable time explaining to Austin why I didn't deserve any consideration. "She said you already took enough from her during the divorce," Austin told me over the phone that Tuesday morning. "She said you were vindictive and selfish, and that she wanted to make sure you understood exactly what she thought of you." I wasn't surprised. Rachel had always been vindictive when she felt wronged. Even from beyond the grave, she was going to make sure I knew my place in her world. But something about the whole situation felt off. Rachel was many things, but she wasn't usually this dramatic about legal matters. She preferred subtle manipulation to grand gestures. Tuesday morning came around and I almost didn't go to Patricia Hoffman's office. What was the point? Austin had made it clear what to expect, and I'd already been through enough humiliation during the divorce proceedings, but something made me get in my truck and drive downtown anyway. Maybe I wanted closure. Maybe I was just curious about what Rachel's final message would be. Patricia Hoffman's law office was in one of those glass towers downtown that I'd helped build the electrical infrastructure for back in 2018. Ironic that I was walking into a building where my crews had run conduit and installed outlet boxes now to hear about how my ex-wife was going to spite me one last time. The lawyer was mid-50s, sharp business suit, the kind of person who bills $400 an hour and doesn't waste time on pleasantries. Austin was already there when I arrived, sitting across from her mahogany desk with this smug expression that reminded me of Rachel during her worst moments. "Thank you both for coming," Patricia said, gesturing for me to take the chair next to Austin. "I know this is a difficult time." She opened a thick folder and pulled out a document that looked like it was about 25 pages long. Legal-sized paper, multiple signatures, official seals. Clearly, Rachel had taken the will preparation seriously. "Mrs. Thompson updated her will 8 weeks before her death," Patricia continued. "She was very specific about her intentions and asked me to ensure that both of you were present for the reading." Austin leaned forward in his chair. He could barely contain his excitement about finally hearing the details of his inheritance. I sat back and tried to prepare myself for whatever cutting remarks Rachel had decided to include about my character and worthiness. "The primary beneficiary of Mrs. Thompson's estate," Patricia said, adjusting her reading glasses, "which includes the family home, investment accounts, life insurance proceeds, and various other assets totaling approximately $3.4 million is—" She paused and looked directly at me. "Michael Thompson." The silence in that room was deafening. Austin's face went white, then red, then white again. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "What?" he said finally. "That can't be right. Mom hated Dad. She told me 100 times that he wasn't getting anything. She said she'd rather burn the money than give it to him." Patricia smiled slightly, the kind of professional smile lawyers use when they're about to deliver news that changes everything. "Your mother was quite clear in her instructions," she said calmly. "She also left your father a letter explaining her decision. She handed me an envelope with my name written in Rachel's familiar handwriting. My hands were actually shaking as I opened it." Austin sat frozen in his chair, staring at me like I'd just grown a second head. "Mike," the letter began, If you're reading this, I'm gone, and Patricia is telling you about my will. I know this comes as a shock, especially to Austin. The truth is, I've had almost 2 years to think about what happened between us. Living with Brandon made me realize some things I didn't want to admit before. You were a good husband, Mike. You worked 70-hour weeks to build us a life most people only dream about. You designed and built our home with your own hands. You never cheated, never lied about money, never made me feel unsafe or unloved. I threw it all away because I was bored and selfish. I convinced myself that your dedication to work meant you didn't care about me, when the truth was, you were building something lasting for our family. Brandon turned out to be exactly what you said he was, a smooth-talking user who was more interested in my divorce settlement than he was in me. Once he moved into the house, he started pressuring me to invest in his cryptocurrency schemes and tech startup ideas. He burned through $180,000 of my money in 8 months on trades that went nowhere and business plans that existed only in his imagination. I've also had to watch what I did to Austin. I turned our son against his father because I was angry and wanted to hurt you. That was unforgivable. Austin needs to learn that actions have consequences, and that the real world doesn't owe him anything just because his mother spoiled him and filled his head with get-rich-quick fantasies. I'm leaving everything to you because you earned it. You built the business that paid for our lifestyle. You paid for the house we lived in. You put money in the investment accounts I'm leaving behind. Most importantly, you tried to be a good father even when I was actively working against you. Please don't give Austin everything right away. Make him work for it. Make him understand the value of what you're giving him. Maybe that way you can still save him from becoming the kind of person I turned him into. I'm sorry, Mike, for all of it. I hope someday you can forgive me, and I hope Austin can forgive me too. Rachel. I read the letter twice before I could look up. Austin was staring at me with this mixture of shock, anger, and confusion that reminded me of the little boy he used to be when he couldn't understand why his toy was broken. "This is impossible," he said. "She wouldn't do this to me. We talked about this. She promised me everything." Patricia cleared her throat. "There's more. Mrs. Thompson also left instructions that Austin would inherit everything upon your death, or sooner if you choose to transfer assets to him. But she wanted you to have full control over the timing and conditions." I folded the letter carefully and put it in my shirt pocket. 2 years of anger and resentment were melting away, replaced by something I hadn't expected: sadness for Rachel and hope for my relationship with Austin. "Austin," I said, "we need to talk." The next few hours were the longest conversation my son and I had had in 2 years. I showed him the letter. I told him about the construction business, about how I'd built everything from nothing, about the mistakes I'd made as a father and husband. But most importantly, I told him about the future. "Your mom was right about one thing," I said. "You need to learn how to work for what you want. The house is yours eventually, but you're going to earn it. Come work for me. Learn the business. Show me you can handle real responsibility." It wasn't easy. Austin had spent 2 years thinking I was the enemy, that I'd somehow cheated his mother out of what she deserved. But slowly, over the next few months, we started rebuilding our relationship. He moved out of Rachel's house, his house now, technically, and got his own apartment. Started working for Thompson Construction as a project coordinator, learning how to read blueprints, manage subcontractor schedules, and deal with the daily challenges of commercial construction. The first few months were rough. Austin was used to having money handed to him, not earning it through 50-hour work weeks in the Texas heat. But Roberto Martinez took him under his wing, teaching him electrical basics and showing him how real craftsmanship worked. Slowly, Austin began to understand what I'd been trying to teach him for years. A year later, Austin bought his first rental property with money he'd saved from his salary at Thompson Construction. He's engaged now to a teacher named Sarah who doesn't put up with any nonsense and actually appreciates the work ethic he's developed. They're planning to move into the family house after they get married next spring. As for me, I'm doing better than I have in years. The business is thriving. We landed the downtown mixed-use project I'd been chasing, plus 2 more medical complexes and a small hospital renovation. I've got 6 crews now and a reputation for quality work that has clients calling us instead of the other way around. I'm dating someone special too, Carol Williams, a widow who owns a bookstore in Deep Ellum. She understands the value of building something that lasts, whether it's a business or a relationship. We take things slow, both of us having learned some hard lessons about trust and communication. Sometimes I think about Rachel's letter. She was right about a lot of things, but wrong about others. Marriage isn't about perfection or constant excitement. It's about choosing to work through problems instead of running away when things get difficult. It's about appreciating what you have instead of always wanting something different. I kept Rachel's letter in my desk drawer for a long time. Last month, I finally threw it away. Not because I was angry anymore, but because I was ready to stop looking backward and start building something new. Austin and I have dinner every Sunday now, usually at my condo where I cook steaks on the little balcony grill. He's turned into the kind of man I always hoped he'd become. Responsible, hardworking, grateful for what he has instead of entitled to what he wants. Rachel would be proud of him. And maybe, just maybe, she'd be proud of me too. The $3.4 million inheritance wasn't really about the money. It was about second chances, about admitting mistakes, and about understanding that it's never too late to do the right thing. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most are also the ones who give us the greatest gifts. Rachel gave me my son back, and that's worth more than any amount of money could ever be.